In the meantime, I can regale you with, I did an interview the other day, and the podcast host at the end was like, I always end with a corny joke. And the joke was, what do you call a butterfly that likes to talk? A social butterfly.
Oh. I can't wait to share that. My kids will love that one.
So if anyone
Should have
has
thought about it.
any other lame, I said lame, I meant really good butterfly jokes, you can put them in the chat.
Not butterfly jokes, but a scarab beetle joke.
Oh boy.
A dung beetle goes into a bar and says, "Is this stool taken?"
That's pretty good too.
Oh my, you win. My hat's off to you.
That's too
Dang.
fun.
You better take that one on the road.
Oh gosh. Anyone else have a good joke? Feel free to chat, type anything in the chat if you have questions or jokes, anything you think of along the way.
No one wants to go after that joke.
I know, that's a hard one to follow. Let's see, I think I'll add my links now so they're there for everybody. We have about 1 or 2 more minutes and then we will get to hear all about Sara's incredible journey. I'm kind of interested too. When everybody logs on, I want to see where everybody's coming from. So we'll have to see where across the country you got followers for this. I think it's kind of neat to know it's more than, it's outside of Ohio.
I'm wondering if the Patrick that's logged on here is the Patrick that asked questions about New York.
Oh,
Yay.
it looks like it is, yeah.
Well, welcome. Thanks for the good questions.
Yeah, when I saw those questions from Pat, I couldn't help but smile because I'm originally from Buffalo, New York. So,
oh, really?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
What part of Buffalo?
Angola.
Oh, okay.
And my husband is from Cheektowaga. Yeah.
Oh, really? We live in Lancaster, so it's right next door to Cheektowaga.
Yeah, how fun. Well, I have your list of questions here too. We'll try to get to those at the end if Sara hasn't covered them, but great questions. Thank you for sending those.
Yeah, you're welcome. Very interested in hearing this story, especially the adventure through Western New York.
Yeah. Buffalo was actually one of my favorite homestays of the trip, and I don't actually talk about it all that often, just because it doesn't quite fit with like kind of the theme of everything. But just while we're waiting for a few more minutes for folks to trickle in, I was looking for camping and I could not find camping. And then I just kind of got into the heart of Buffalo, or the suburbs of Buffalo, faster than I was expecting, and I usually just camp off the side of the road and that becomes harder. So I was looking at schools, but it was like the weekend and I can't like camp when there's like, kids playing in the soccer field. And then there was also, I go to churches a lot, but it was just all of them were having services, or I'm not really sure. And finally, I just was like, I just have to ask one of these churches if I can camp in their yard. And they said no. And I just was like so desperate, and I got kind of mad, and not mad. I just got like, I don't know what to do. I got desperate. And this woman she's like, hey, I live across the street. You can just stay with me. And we went in her backyard, and there was milkweed in this corner, and I found some monarch eggs and a little just hatched caterpillar, a first instar. And I was telling her about how a lot of people believe the monarch caterpillars the monarchs are like the souls of their loved ones returning to visit. And she just looked at me, and she had just, and I've asked for permission to use this story, but she had her baby was supposed to have been born on the day I was there, but unfortunately she had a miscarriage, and it was just this powerful moment where it was like, it just felt like everything was meant to be. And I was only planning to stay one night, and I ended up staying with them several days. It just felt like everything in the universe had like led me to this moment with them. And they had 3 awesome kids, and um or 4 awesome kids, sorry. And they were just, it was so fun. So I have just such good memories from Buffalo.
Yeah, it's the
Wow,
city of
what a
good neighbors.
story.
Definitely true.
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
Thank you
that's a
for
crazy
sharing
story
that.
to start with without any introduction or anything. But
Thank you for sharing that.
yeah.
Well, we
So
gave a few minutes. I think everybody's here. We will get a few more tricklers, but thank you all for joining us. My name is Julia. I'm with the Friends Group at Ottawa National Wildlife Refuge. Just a reminder, we are a 501c3 nonprofit established in 1997 to support Ohio's only national wildlife refuge complex with youth development, public use projects, and most recently, land acquisition and restoration. We are located along the southern shore of Lake Erie near Oak Harbor in some of the most critical wetland habitats in the world. If you're interested in learning more about us and what we do, I just dropped a link in there for our homepage. This will point you in the right direction to become a member, make a tax-deductible donation to support our work, and shop our nature store, which is stocked with Sarah's new book, complete with her fancy signature there. She was kind enough to sign all of our copies that we have available for you, as well as include one of her beautiful watercolor artwork prints. So please be sure to check that out. If you haven't got the book yet, we would love you to get it from us and support Ottawa. So today, you are all here to hear about Sarah's incredible journey. In 2017, Sarah was the first person to follow the eastern population of monarch butterflies on their round trip, multinational, multi-generational migration. She did this all on a bicycle. From Mexico to Canada and back, her 10,201 mile adventure on her beat up bicycle was a call to action. And Sarah, with that introduction, I think you have all of our attention. So take it away.
awesome. Well, thank you. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I'm in California, so for me it's kind of a dreary morning, but I heard it might be a little dreary there as well. It still means a lot to come inside in the spring and sit in front of a computer, so thanks. And I actually have a little presentation with photos. Photos always help, and except there's no photos in my book, so this is a special thing here. But I'm gonna just do a little quick configuration and get that going.
Well, Sarah's getting up and running. I just wanted to remind you, if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat, and I can field those and either ask them during the presentation or hold them till the end and answer any questions you may have.
Thanks. And right now, are you seeing me and a monarch?
Yes, it's perfect.
Awesome. Perfect. Okay, so today I was gonna just chat for a little bit about science, a little bit about my adventure, and a little bit about kind of why I love nature and kind of some of the gifts that the Monarch has given me. And I'll talk for probably about half an hour or so. And if you, like Julie said, if you have any questions, Julia, sorry, if you have any questions, just chat or write them down so we don't forget. And speaking of questions, the first question that I always get is why monarchs? So I've started when I speak to just kind of to answer that question. Why monarchs? Why did I follow the monarchs? And it's not as amazing of a story. Like I don't have that moment. And in fact, for me, like my first love is amphibians. I love frogs. I am actually a wildlife biologist in the summers. I do seasonal field work counting tadpoles. And that's kind of actually how I raise money for my trips is I work for 4 months in the summers and then the job ends. So I don't have to worry about quitting. I don't have to do any of the like transitioning from a normal job. Like the job just ends. And so you're like, well, what do I do now? And so I kind of just got in this routine of I'd work for a few summers and then I'd plan a trip, and I could miss a summer and then find work the next summer really easy. All that with frogs. And so because this is a book tour and this is my first book and I'm just starting to do virtual events, so I still like find it amazing to say I will now read from my book Bicycling with Butterflies. But I do have a few paragraphs that really explain why I chose the Monarch, and I think that since it's a little bit about my book, a little bit about bikes, and a little bit about monarchs, I thought I would just read these few paragraphs. And it starts out about frogs, so now we understand I love frogs. So, my leap from studying amphibians to biking with butterflies seemed like an obvious one. My love of amphibians and reptiles translated easily into a love of monarchs. Both are transformational underdogs, sensitive to environmental changes that could easily go unnoticed if you forget to look. Both metamorphose under impossible odds, both leave me in awe. Following frogs by bike would have had its limitations. Frogs rarely travel far from their natal lands, and never across continents. They rarely thrive among humans, and their existential solutions have higher hurdles to clear. The migrating monarchs, however, were a perfect storm of possibility. As a whole, the migration advances an average of 25 to 30 miles a day, though individual monarchs can go much farther. One monarch was recorded going 265 miles in one day. Go much farther. A cyclist can cover a similar distance. Spreading out in the millions across a landscape traced with roads, there were few route planning limitations. At home in backyards, school gardens, parks, roadside ditches, and the wildest places, monarchs, like clouds, are democratic in their reach. Following them by bike seemed meant to be. Monarchs, too, are easy to spot and identify, their beauty easy to appreciate. I saw them as gateway bugs and ambassadors to nature, teachers inviting people to look closer. Robustly studied, yet the subject of many unanswered questions, they showcased the power of science. Threatened with extinction, they were the motivation I needed to use my body, time, voice, bike to contribute to the conservation movement. So I love frogs, but then I saw this. I saw the Monarch Range Map and I said, wow, that feels meant to be. And I'll make this a little bit bigger for a second so people can see. This is a Monarch Range Map, and there's the different colors to showcase where the monarchs are at different times of year. And so, like I just read, the monarchs will overwinter in the forests of Michoacan, and they're also in the state of Mexico, and they'll fly north, and then they really spread out. So if you're looking at this map, the green is where they spend the spring. So as long as I was in the green zone in the spring, I was on the route of the monarch, and as long as I was in the yellow zone in the summer, then I was on the route of the monarch. And then orange is the fall. And the other thing to note on this is that the migration is multi-generational. So I did the whole loop. In fact, here's my route. This route is a 10,201 mile line that took me about 8.5 months to follow. But I did the whole loop. The monarchs, well, they only do a portion of it each. It's like a relay race for them. The migration is multi-generational. So the monarchs that overwinter in Mexico, they will fly to Texas or southern United States where they'll lay their eggs and die. And those eggs, we call that the first generation. They will continue the migration north. They'll live a shorter amount of time than the overwintering generation. They'll live as an adult about a month. And in that time, they'll mate and they'll be laying eggs. Then they'll die, and those eggs will carry on. And it's not until the fall, when the monarchs born in the fall will emerge. They'll be in sexual diapods, which means they won't mate, they won't lay eggs, yet they will fly back to Mexico to wait out the winter and then start again in the spring. Excuse me. So like I said, the monarch is just such a perfect traveling companion. And it was my goal while I did this trip to learn about the monarch and to be their voice and to really share their story. And before I get into any more about that, I also want to do a quick intro on bike touring as well. So here is my setup. That is me. If you'll notice, there's common milkweed in the background there. And my bike is not what you call beautiful. I describe it as a mix between a garage sale and a scrapyard, but it gets the job done. And you don't need to have anything fancy to do a trip like this. You really just need a comfortable bike. You need the time, and you need to just set a date and go. That's really the most important part. For me, the hardest part is always just starting. And my bags called panniers carry everything I needed. The back bags are actually old kitty litter buckets. So again, you can make do. And then the bags around the outside are from a thrift store. They're like a server apron that have pockets, and I would put all the things that could get wet on those pockets. And so because I carried everything I needed, while I was on my trip, my daily schedule was wake up without much of a plan other than to keep moving towards my ultimate next stop. So I would have spaced out every week or so. I would say, oh, I know I'm going to be going to, let's say, I know I'm going to be in Kansas City for a presentation. So I need to be in Kansas City, but I have 300 miles to get there. I have 5 days. I have to go however many miles. And so I would kind of have a general idea of where I was going and what I needed to do, but for those 5 days, I didn't have a plan. I didn't know where I was going to be. But because I had my stuff on my bike, I could eat when I was hungry, and I would go to a grocery store, usually about once a day, kind of depending. And this is a picture of me cooking. That actually didn't happen all that often. I mostly lived on sandwiches because I'm kind of a lazy cook. And if you eat everything between 2 slices of bread, there's never dishes. But I did cook from time to time. Lots of sandwiches, though. And then the other great thing about biking and carrying everything you need and not having a plan is that you could stop whenever you want. So I would eat when I was hungry, and I would stop when I was curious, and I would stop for everything, big and small. This is some dinosaurs I saw in a state park in Texas. And also, if you look down here, there's some wildflowers, some Indian paintbrush, and I would stop for flowers. And in fact, I would stop so much, and I would be crawling around the ditches so much. People would stop at least 3 times. People stopped, and one time it was the highway patrol, or I think it was the police of some sort, because so many people had called in a cyclist having crashed because I was crawling around in the ditch. And so I was always stopping and discovering things that everyone else was zooming by. But on a bike, you can't zoom by. You're forced to go slow, and you're forced to notice everything, all these amazing secrets in your own yard, in your own city, in your own town. And the other great thing about by traveling by bike this way is that you sleep when wherever you're tired. And this is a very classic camp spot. There's my tent. There's the road. I'm basically hidden in plain sight. And people are always kind of shocked when I tell them this, but for me, it's actually really important. Because for me, I'm a traveler, and I love turning wherever I land for the night into a home. And often it's kind of this forgotten space. It's like maybe marginal land alongside the highway. It's pretty much just kind of neglected and forgotten. And then for one night, it becomes my home. And camping where I landed each day, really, I felt like bonded me to the experience of the Monarch. And I think, because I could imagine the Monarch too, right? The Monarch used to be able to fly north and would just land in the perfect spot every night because it was all prairie. And then slowly things changed, and slowly it got harder to find those perfect camp spots. And I think it's the same for me and for traveling, is I know what it feels like to be traveling and not be able to find that perfect spot to camp. But I also know just how glorious it is when everything lines up, when you find just what you're looking for. And people don't sometimes understand the power of having that perfect spot. And it doesn't have to be like, I'm not picky, but for me, the perfect spot is if it's flat, if I feel pretty secure, and if there's a tree for me to prop up my bike so that I can load and unload things without it being on the ground. And so I feel the emotion that a Monarch must have gone through. Sometimes they'd land in a backyard that had everything it needed, and then sometimes it could fly maybe a lot farther than it wanted, looking for some sort of refuge. Now I get to this part, and people are like, yeah, I don't want to do that. But so now I'm going to do the two best reasons to bike tour this way. And one is you don't have to clean a house. Well, you do, but it's very easy. You just lift it up and shake it out. So that's me doing my daily cleaning. And the other thing is when you're on the road, you're really vulnerable. Like you're going slow and people can see you and it's easy for people to wave you down and ask you questions that would never happen in a car. And so day after day after day, I would get stopped and I would get given food, given tokens of appreciation, just given a good word, a smile, a conversation. One time actually on Long Island, I was like, I heard this guzzling big car or truck come behind me and I braced and they were coming really close, but they were slowing down. And then out the window flies a $10 bill and you just hear, buy yourself a snack as he zooms off. And so people want to be part of the adventure and they want to help in their own way. And so I was just constantly finding this sort of hospitality. And it was this impromptu hospitality, like this man in Mexico, he stopped me on this highway. It must have been 100 degrees out. I was just roasting and asked for ice cream. And for me, if I feel safe, I always say yes. And so when he asked, of course I said yes. And that was the impromptu, but often they were a little bit more staged meetings because what I learned as I started to bike was that there is this incredible network of people taking care of the monarchs. And how I was kind of bonded to the experience of the monarch through my camping, I also was by the hospitality I received. And on my trip, I stayed with 68 families. And most of them were folks that heard about my trip from someone, maybe the news, maybe a friend, maybe social media, and then they would invite me to their house. And again, if I felt safe and I could swing the miles, I would always try and say yes. And what I love about that is I somehow, by doing this, I managed to find the people taking care of the monarch. And so the same people that were feeding me and giving me a safe place to stay and a place to rest were also the people feeding the monarch. And no picture explains this better than this one. And this is Margaret. She's a dairy farmer in Canada. She was like a friend of no, wait, let's get this right. I had a friend in Arkansas who had a friend in Sudbury, Ontario. I stayed with them, and then they had a friend, Margaret, and they invited me they told her about me. It's all kind of twisted, and sometimes I don't even remember how all the connections happened, but I was invited to Margaret's, and here she's feeding me homemade ice cream from her dairy cows. It was so good. And then in the background, who is she feeding? Monarchs and other pollinators. And so again, I think that the monarch and I have the same people to thank in a lot of ways. And this is really important because we need all the help we can get. The monarchs do, and I, but the monarchs especially, because here's their population numbers, and the details aren't super important. What's important to note is that all natural wildlife populations fluctuate year to year. This is based on annual weather cycles, climate cycles, and then but the important thing to note in this is that the trend is down. And scientists, so there's a number here, it's a 6.05. That means in 2000, the winter of 2018 and 19, the population was about 6 hectares, which basically is, they measure the population of the monarchs in Mexico by measuring not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you'd go crazy, but by measuring the amount of space the monarchs take up. And scientists are trying to get that, they have deemed a stable population of monarchs at 6 hectares. And if you look, we've gotten to 6 hectares just a few times in recent years, and barely. So right now the monarch population, the eastern monarch population, is not stable, and it's going down, and it's scary and it can be kind of depressing. But the great thing about the monarch is that everyone can help. Everyone can be part of the solution. And for a lot of people, like Margaret, like I'm sure folks in the audience, it's returning some of your land to natives, planting native plants, and especially milkweed, which is the only food source of the monarch caterpillar, and returning native lands to the native plants and animals. And this is just so crucial. And for me, I don't have any land. I don't own land. I don't own any property. So for me, I had to come up with another way to help the monarchs, and everyone's going to have a different way. But for me, it was to be a voice for the monarch. And on my trip, I did formal presentations to about 9,000 people, mostly schools. I presented to 49 schools and 31 nature centers. I actually presented at quite a few wildlife refuges. So I'm a huge fan of the refuge system. This is a picture of me at a school in Kansas City, Missouri, doing my Monarch Happy Dance. There was a request for that. It looks like this. And it's anytime I see a monarch, because at the start of my trip, I had a lot of doubt, not so much about the miles, but about if I would even see monarchs. And so I invented my Monarch Happy Dance on a road in Mexico when I saw that first monarch since leaving the colonies. And boy, I was dancing around, and all the cars were like skirting way around me. They were a little frightened. They didn't know what to make of me, but I celebrated every monarch. And I actually didn't see that many monarchs, but I think I saw, let's see, I wrote it down. I saw 722 adult monarchs on my 8.5 month trip, which averages like about 2.5 monarchs a day, which isn't very many, but I saw thousands of people. And that was more important to me because that is how I was able to be a voice for the monarch. And I say two things a lot. One is we can't talk to everyone, but we can all talk to somebody. And the other thing I always say is our voices add up. And the monarch is such a great teacher about this. This is a lesson the monarch taught me. And this is a picture in Mexico at their overwintering grounds. And when one monarch flies, at least I don't hear it. I can't hear it. But when thousands of monarchs erupt in the sky, and this happens in Mexico, and the sun will hit a colony, hit a cluster of monarchs, and they'll all warm in unison, and they'll kind of stretch their wings, and then they'll just erupt. And when they do that, they'll start circling around, and you can actually hear the hum of their wings. And for me, this was my favorite part when I would visit the colonies in the winter, was these moments where you could just close your eyes and just know you were in a cloud of monarchs. And so I think, well, one monarch doesn't make a sound, but thousands make this beautiful song. And it's the same with us, right? My voice alone is just a whisper, but if everyone that I speak to tells somebody, and if all of you tonight tell some people, tell your neighbors, tell your families, well, all of a sudden it ripples out and we create something loud that can't be ignored. And that is what I found on my trip, is that there's a lot of voices, and they're all saying we need to save the monarch. We can do this, and it's our responsibility. And it's important because what I found on my trip was that there were lots of monarchs left to save, and there's lots of habitat that's kind of hidden in plain sight, just like my camping. This is a road in Indiana, and there's a monarch caterpillar on this milkweed. It's a 5th instar, and I actually got pretty good at finding caterpillars while I was biking. And I would often jump off my bike and I'd do my little Monarch Happy Dance while I was in the ditch, and my wheels would still be spinning, and I would already be off my bike looking at the little secrets on the side of the road. And so I spent a lot of time celebrating these roadside creatures, and then I spent a lot of time mourning them as well. And this is just one little tiny example of what's happening to our planet. Is we're not sharing. We're not thinking about how our actions affect other creatures. And it was every day, it was everywhere. Like, this is a school. This is just a huge green grass yard. That's using a lot of water, a lot of fertilizer, I imagine, probably some herbicides, probably some pesticides. And it's not helping any of our more than human neighbors. And this has got to change. And we cut down our grass, we mow these huge swaths of yard because we want to be good neighbors. And I get it, we want to be good neighbors, but we have to think about the whole planet. We have to think about all our neighbors. And so we need a paradigm shift. We need to start seeing this as unnecessary. We need to start seeing wildlands as what is actually beautiful and what it actually means to be a good neighbor. And it's not easy to do, and it takes small steps, and it starts with all of us. And it was on my journey meeting the people that were taking these small steps that really kept me going. And and I call these places medicine. And one of the places that I would find these small steps was in the refuge system. And I say this because it is true to my heart that I would go miles out of my way to bike through a little refuge, because it was not just a refuge for wildlife, but it was a refuge for myself as well. Because biking through land, like, or if you're biking down a road and it's full of wildflowers and then you see that for sale sign, it hurts. So then I would find these little refuges, and I could just get there and I could just like let my guard down, and I could celebrate these creatures because I knew next year they'd have a home, and I knew that they were safe. And it was just so important to me. So I'm so thrilled to be continuing to speak to refuges and just reminding people how special they are, and to be connected to their own little special one near their house. It's key to the Monarchs' future. More medicine that I found was at schools. This is a school garden in Omaha, and these kids were so awesome, and their teacher was so awesome. I went out of my way to go to the school. I'm so glad I did, because this picture, it used to just be a green slope that was hard to mow in the parking area. And the teacher convinced the school to turn it into a little monarch garden. They've got milkweed there, and you can see we are learning so much in this moment. And we found eggs, and we shouted with joy, and even a male monarch cruised over our heads while we were all out there. And boy, me and like 33rd graders were all just like, yeah! And it was just so joyous, and it was so easy to make happen. I mean, it was a lot of work for them, but like, we didn't have to like redirect migrations. Like, the monarch found this tiny little garden in the sea of suburban sprawl. And it really is just a testament to, like, if you grow it, they will come. And if you grow it, they're going to gift you all these lessons, and they're going to be a wonderful science experiment for your kids to learn about nature and science and conservation and connection. They're such great animals. We need gardens at every school. That's certainly something that I realized on the course of my trip. And some more medicine was this guy. I met a few farmers that were doing really amazing things. This is Bill from Native American Seed in Junction, Texas. And he started his career planting Bermuda grass lawns as a landscaper. And one day was just like, what am I doing? Like, this is Texas. We don't have water. Why am I seeking out and planting this grass that needs so much from us, when there's plants that have evolved here that are ready to thrive in the soil without any intervention? And so he switched, and he became a seed farmer, a native seed farmer, and his family now, he operates this really awesome operation, and they are cultivating natives, collecting the seeds and selling them to pretty much replant Texas, which is just so beautiful. And then there were the backyard gardens. I stayed with a lot of people that had small gardens. This is such a great example of one. There's the green grass, there's a patio, and then there's milkweed in their little garden there. And this is what it means to share. And in this little garden, this was in Tulsa at Oklahoma, and Amy's garden, she'd already found 40 eggs on this milkweed by the time I got there. And here's like the great thing, like, if only one of those eggs survives, well, that's 500 eggs in the next generation. And if only, so a female usually lays about 500 eggs, and about 1% survive. So if one of those survivors lays 500 eggs and 1% of those survives, then that's thousands more eggs by the time they get to New York, by the time they get to Ohio. And so it's easily imaginable that a monarch you have seen was thanks only to someone in Tulsa, Oklahoma, planting a small little garden. And that connection is so important and so powerful. And it's the opposite way too. Perhaps the only reason that someone in Tulsa sees a migrating monarch heading south in the fall is because one of you had a garden, or the refuge had managed the land for the monarchs. And wow, like, I just love that. Every monarch I saw, I would think, where did that monarch come from? Like, who planted the garden for that monarch? And so this is just a great example of how we share. Now, one of my favorite gardens was the front yard. We can't think of our natives only being in the backyard, hidden away. we need to remember and celebrate that the natives should be in our front yards and they should be everywhere. And Nadia was just the queen of this. She lives in Columbia, Missouri, and I she should have just been like, go down whatever street she lives, because it was very obvious as I was biking down her street, which was her house, the one covered in natives. There's a big milkweed stalk in the front foreground there. And I could have explored Nadia's front yard for days. And there were so many amazing creatures. There were walking sticks, and there were monarch caterpillars, and there were butterflies of all sort, and birds. The list goes on. But what I love most about this picture is you can see where the property line is, and you can see what her neighbor's yard looks like. But you can see there's some milkweed here. And I asked her about it, and she said, well, the neighbors used to mow down everything, and then they learned that if there's no milkweed, there's no monarchs. So they started mowing around this milkweed. And this is how it happens. It's not anything but the spread of ideas. Nadia is an example on her street, and we can watch her garden expand by being an example. And the milkweed will also expand by giving the chance and the opportunity. And we need an example on every street. And so you guys could, or I'm sure some of you already are that example, and that's just so wonderful. And it's, you know, when you're gardening in your own yard, you forget that you're part of something bigger often. And I really think one of the great things about my trip was that I went from house to house, and I could share with people like, you're the example on your street, but don't worry, because 10 miles that way, there's someone else, you know, part of the team taking care of their neighborhood. And it doesn't matter where you live. This was a monarch I found in New York City. And the lesson that this monarch had was, we look, but we don't see, because all the other tourists are snapping photos of shiny buildings and whatever it is people that like cities take pictures of. I'm not in my zone in cities, but I saw this monarch, and so I was taking pictures of this monarch, and I just kept thinking, this is proof. Monarchs will live anywhere. Monarchs are ready to visit us if we just give them the chance. And so that made me think of another metaphor, and I really love all the metaphors that monarchs offer. And one of them is this picture. If you look in the background here, there is this tree, and it's a skinny tree, I'll give you that, but it's bending from the weight of monarchs. And if there was one monarch on this tree, nothing would change. But there are thousands of monarchs on this tree, and in fact, there can be so many monarchs on even a pretty good-sized branch that the weight, the collective weight of the monarchs will break them. And so I think about Nadia's garden, and I think about Amy and Tulsa's garden, and I think about the wildlife refuges, and I think about all of the people I stayed with, and I think their collective action, our collective action, is metaphorically like the monarchs, like bending branches. And it's so crucial. We need every single one. And the other metaphor I love about this picture is, I wrote a book about bicycling with butterflies, but each one of these butterflies in this picture, I swear they could write a better book. It would be full of adventure. Like, these are true adventurers, and each of their stories is important, and each of their bodies adds to this collective phenomenon. And all of our action, all the monarchs, all of it is important. And it's important for a lot of reasons. So people always ask, why protect monarchs? And it's a question that bugs me, I'll admit, and it depending on my mood, it'll be how short I am with the person. But there's a lot of ecological reasons monarchs are important, but for me, the main reason monarchs are important is for all the lessons that they teach us. The lesson of one, or lots equals a phenomenon, I think, is one of the biggest lessons they teach me. But the other lesson is that they are ambassadors to nature, and they are guides. And it's so easy to fall in love with the butterfly. Look at it. It's just like this beautiful orange creature. And so people will fall in love with the orange creature that is irresistibly beautiful. And then they will be like, oh, I want to learn more. I want to learn, what are the caterpillars like? And you can't see a caterpillar going 90 miles an hour down the freeway. You've got to stop, and you've got to get on your hands and knees, and you've got to look through the vegetation, and then you'll find the caterpillars. And while you're looking for the monarch caterpillars that are so cute, you'll start to find all the other creatures that rely on that habitat, like these tussock moths who also eat milkweed, and the googly-eyed spiders, probably eating milkweed or monarch eggs, and the other pollinators like this hummingbird moth, which I took this picture in New York and my mind was blown. I'd never seen hummingbird moth before. And of course, even frogs are helped by saving monarch habitat. This is a little froglet that just metamorphosed just outside of Buffalo, actually, Buffalo, New York, and I found him in this common milkweed leaf. And so the monarch will bring you in. They'll say, "Don't worry, follow me. It's not that scary." And they'll bring you into the world. And they'll say, look how beautiful these shaggy carpet moths are. That's what I call tussock moths. And look, look at the details in this frog. And they'll bring you in and they'll remind you that when we save monarch habitat, we're saving all the creatures, which is so critical. And so I think it's important to note that you don't have to bike through Mexico to save the monarchs. You can if you want. It was quite fun. This was an amazing day. I was actually stabbed by one of these yuccas on accident. My arm hurt for like a month, but that's another story for another day. You don't have to bike through Mexico to save the monarchs. You don't have to navigate big cities. I got lost in a subdivision of New York. I went to the wrong apartment building. I got very close. Like the key didn't work. I was in the wrong apartment. The right floor, right door. And you don't have to navigate and fend off the wild creatures in Canada. Scariest animal of the trip was the skunk. And luckily we both went away unscathed, or got away unscathed. All you have to do is plant your garden. And the adventure, if the adventure will be in your own backyard, will be at your own refuge, and the true adventurers, the monarchs, will visit you. So I have so much to say. Actually, I skipped a few spots to read because I was talking too much, but I do want to read the last two paragraphs of my acknowledgments. And I fought so hard for the acknowledgments in my book. I think most acknowledgments, they'll be like a page or two at the most. Mine is 7 pages long. And that's because it was a solo trip made possible by literally thousands of people. So there were all the people that helped plan my presentations, all the people that provided me places to stay and food, all the people that showed up to my presentations. That was as important, right? Because that's how I was able to spread my story and the monarch story. So it's a 7 pages long, and the last 2 I think really sum it up. So I'll end here with this. Thanks to everyone fighting in endlessly big and small ways on behalf of the monarchs and their neighbors. Our paths may not have crossed, but your efforts are seen, felt, and appreciated. Biking past an unmowed ditch or a lawn devoted to natives will always make me hoot with joy. And finally, with all my heart and soul, thanks to the monarchs. You amaze me. You have become my teachers, encouraging an adventure, teaching me Spanish, watercolor, web design, video editing, photography, networking, public speaking, gardening, stewardship, science, and love. You helped me write this book, and every word of it is for you. And I truly believe that. Without the monarch, bicycling with butterflies wouldn't exist. Without the monarch, I wouldn't be having this presentation. They keep leading me on these new adventures, and I'm so grateful for them. I'm so grateful for everyone coming out. I want to give a shout out, like Julia said, you can buy my book Bicycling with Butterflies with that fancy signature. I have to say, my signature until about 6 weeks ago was terrible. And my friends all looked at it and they were like, "That can't be your signature, Sarah. It's really bad." So I spent like 2 days like a kid, they scribbling their name on the notebook in class. I did that for like 2 days and I found one that was a lot better, I think. So you'll get the new and improved signature. And then this is the watercolor that Julia spoke of. It's one of my favorites. There's a male monarch, and this is Joe Pyeweed, which was all over the Northeast there. And I love Joe Pyeweed, and there's some goldenrod too in the background. And then if you want to see more photos or more watercolors, my website is beyondabook.org. And I'm going to switch over the screen just to a normal screen. And then if folks have questions, I don't actually think I answered all of Pat's questions. So if maybe we could run through some of those too. So let's get this going.
I have some questions up here. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your story with us.
Of course.
In your book, you said the real goal is to connect with people who can save them. And your passion is definitely helping people to see and understand the monarch. With understanding comes appreciation, and appreciation motivates action. So everyone here, I think, is definitely motivated. I know I am to even, I have some pollinator plants and I just keep wanting to do more and more every year, and encourage my neighbors to do the same. So I hope everyone here does that and shares Sarah's story and her message with people they know. Oh, so should we take some questions here? In the chat, Jessica would like to know the typical lifespan of a monarch.
Right. So it depends on the generation. The monarchs that are born in the spring and summer, they live as an adult about a month. So 2 to 6 weeks. They start mating and laying eggs when they're about 3 days old. And then the monarchs born in the fall, well, they have another story, right? If they lay eggs in 3 days, those eggs will freeze to death. So instead, they will fly south over winter and wait for spring before flying north, mating and laying eggs. And so they'll live about 8 months, and they're often called the overwintering generation or the super generation. And it's really cool because when you're in Texas in the spring or anywhere in the southern United States in the spring, the monarchs you see are so tattered and faded, and they just look they look like just warriors. They're survivors, and then you'll see that first new generation, and they're just like shiny and just so vibrant, and it's always so obvious, if it's the first generation or the last of the overwintering generation, which is really cool.
We have another question. Do you recommend any books that would be good to combine pollinators, plants, garden planning?
For me, the best way to learn about gardens is to go to your local plant nursery, find a native plant society, find a native nursery. They're popping up all over the place. You might be able to offer some better links to that, Julia, or folks in the crowd might know. And then start planning, for me that's the best way to learn. Does anyone have a good book recommendation?
I know Ottawa does an annual native plant sale too. So if you are in Ohio, check out our website that I dropped the link, and we'll have some information about that. But we encourage people to get those plants from us, plant them in their garden, help the native plants make a comeback.
I have to do a shout out. I haven't read all of his books yet, but I read Nature's Best Hope by Doug Tallamy, and it's about backyard gardens, and it doesn't go into the specifics, which might be more what you're interested in, but it is another resource for why planting natives are important.
I just picked up that book too, actually. And we'll be selling that in the nature store because I ordered some of those as well.
Right.
That is a good one, yeah. Is it beneficial for folks to raise monarchs, like in containers and feeding them milkweed, or should they let Mother Nature do the raising?
My opinion on this, and people have strong opinions on this. I don't agree when people say that they're saving monarchs by raising them. I think that Mother Nature is crucial, but I see some huge benefits to doing it, and mostly it's kind of what I was speaking about the monarch being an ambassador and a guide. And so if the way that you can connect to a monarch is by watching them grow in a small cage, preferably with natural light and natural conditions, like outside with just some netting, then I say go for that, because that's how people connect, and that's how people get to know monarchs. And if you can do that and invite your neighborhood kids or even older folks to also witness the transformation, the metamorphosis, or take them to schools, like they become these amazing teachers. And so I think if raising monarchs gets you excited, then go for it. I wouldn't say you need to raise thousands. Like, we do want nature to do its thing, but certainly some, just for the thrill of it.
And then I have some more of those questions from Pat.
And I
when you
see
were
Peter
bicycling?
raising his hand too.
Oh, when you were going through Western New York, were there any places that they seem to gather at certain times of the year that you could tell Pat to go check out?
Right, this would be another good question to field to folks. I biked through in the late summer, I want to say, or no, maybe early summer actually, early summer. And in the summer, the monarchs really spread out. It isn't until the fall that they'll start roosting, which is where at night they'll kind of gather together, and then in the morning they'll disperse. And that happens more in the fall. And I think in those locations change from time to time. I went through, what is that? It's a state park with the river, Letchworth?
Letchworth, yep.
Letchworth. And I
Yes,
saw quite a
Letchworth.
few monarchs there, which was really nice. Any place with gardens. I actually was on like some side roads to get there that were just covered in wildflowers, and I saw a lot of monarchs those days. So go where the flowers are.
And I have
Peter.
some more questions.
Oh,
Uh,
and
Sorry,
Did
go
I
ahead.
see, did I see a solar panel on the back of your bike?
you saw a lot of garbage on the back of my bike.
There was something very flat, a square.
That was a sign. So
Oh,
I
okay.
it was an old, like a political campaign type sign, like the corrugated plastic, and I drew my, actually I think I actually had it printed professionally. I printed my route and my website on there, and that really helped people start
Okay.
conversations. And my bike is sort of like a dog. People always want to talk to people with dogs.
Yes.
People always want to talk to people with bikes.
Yeah.
And that was the goal, right? Was like they'd be like, "Where are you from?" And I'd be like, "I'm going to tell you to plant milkweed." And they'd be like, "I'm sorry I asked." But it was a conversation starter. and
Yeah.
and it, like the map itself, people could look at it, and seeing a map really changes how the trip. So
Yeah.
I could tell them I bike from Mexico, and they'd be like, "Okay," and then I'd show them on the map, and they'd be like, "You biked from Mexico?" And
Yeah.
so it was just a good visual that really helped me.
Okay.
I didn't need a solar panel because I would usually find a place to plug in things once a day or so, and so I'd often like go to a city park, and
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
so good at finding water spigots, finding outlets,
Bathroom.
finding shade or a picnic table, finding Wi-Fi. Libraries were always good for that. Especially if it was raining, I'd go to a library and you could stay there for 4 hours, do all the things you need to do, charge everything, and libraries and are like wildlife refuges for cyclists in a lot of ways.
Thank you. Wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Sticking with some of those cycling questions, did you have to pace yourself throughout your journey?
I did pace myself. People always ask if you trained. Like I would just start every morning and then end. I would try and bike all day. I bike really slow, like 10 miles an hour usually. In Mexico, it was like 6 miles an hour because it was so hilly and rocky. And I'd bike all day, and I'd stop when I was tired. And I would try and go about 60 miles a day. So that was more like, like at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I'd be like crawling around in the ditch or like doing some random exploration, and I'd look and be like, I've only gone 10 miles. I better ignore that caterpillar. Don't look. In fact, sometimes I have like these earbuds. I would just put one earbud in so I could still hear traffic if there was traffic, and I'd listen to a podcast or something to sort of tune out because I would get so distracted by all the things on the side of the road, and then I could get some miles in.
And did you have someone helping you from a home base? And I can't help but think, kind of add on to that question, did you have someone constantly worrying about you too that you had to check in with? Or
I managed most of the like logistics on my own, and I had I had a computer, and I would do a lot of that sort of behind the scenes planning and networking and all that just on my own, often in my tent, often in the middle of nowhere at night. And then I also I had a little GPS tracker that it wasn't useful for me to navigate, but every day I could press it once and it would upload a GPS point to my website so people could track me. So even if I wasn't updating my website daily, people could still tune in to see my progress. And my parents obviously looked at that all the time, and so that way they knew I was okay.
This is actually my mom's favorite quote in the book, but beautiful sights are made more beautiful by the challenge of getting there. So you kind of allowed yourself to wing it. You know, you planned a little bit, but a lot of it, I know you kind of figured out as you went along. So
Yeah, and that's it. Like if you plan too much, then you can't say yes to things. You're like, oh no, I already put a deposit down for this campground that's 30 miles away, and I'm gonna lose $25 if I do. So I gotta just keep going. But if you don't have a plan, then when someone says, hey, do you want to eat a bunch of free ice cream at my house? You say, heck yeah, let's go.
and I know this is your first book. If other people wanted to write a book, like who did you work with, or what was the process? How do you get started writing your first book?
I mean, I said in that last part of the acknowledgments that the Monarchs helped me write the book, and I say that in total sincerity. About halfway through my trip, this is not my first adventure. I've ridden my bike probably about 80,000 miles. I canoed the Missouri River. I've walked across the United States. But this was the first trip where when people would ask, are you going to write a book? I started thinking, I think I need to. And about halfway through, I had a lot to say and people wanted to listen. And I said, I have to write this book for the Monarchs. It's just another way to expand my voice. And so at the end of my trip, I wrote in a journal every night and I took a lot of photos, which was key. And then at the end of my trip, I sat down in front of my computer and I wrote about everything. And I just wrote and I wrote, and it was all terrible. The first draft was twice as long as this draft. But it helped. It just got it all out. I see a question there about mental struggles. I was depressed, Austin, on my trip. I was angry at the world. I was angry at people telling me they used to see monarchs and that there weren't any left. And I didn't realize it until I started writing how I just needed to get that out. And putting it in this book was therapy in a lot of ways. And then from there, the Monarchs just kept asking for more, and they said, hey, if you're gonna do this, you better go back and edit. And so the process took a few years, and I got the advice to put articles in magazines. And the second article I got in a magazine, was enough to get six publishers interested in my book, and 2 of them offered me a contract. And then I just kept going. The Monarchs, I keep saying this over and over again, they're both teachers, and the more that I help them, the more I want to be their voice, the more they return the favor. And I can't help but thank them for the opportunities and all that's coming after this. Oh shoot. So thank you, Monarchs. This book is for you.
And I know you said your writing's a mess, but I have to completely disagree because it is so beautifully written. You do such a nice job really painting a picture. So we feel like we were there with you in Mexico. And it's really surprised me what I've read so far, that it's not just about learning so much more about monarchs than I ever knew, or biking, but it's about human connection and making these relationships with people. And it's just a really good book. So I hope you all buy it. And we're going to have a book club. So please find it on Facebook. I just started it. Anyone can join. You can share it, and we can all stay connected as we read the book together. Think of some good things to ask Sarah, because she's going to join us again. And for everybody who's, got the book, however you get it, hopefully from us, but we can all stay connected and read it together and ask Sarah any questions we have. I know it's been hard I have so many pages that I have all these I want to ask you about, but I'm saving them for next time. So be sure to join us in the Seek Refuge days for the other events that we have with Sarah.
Yes, thank you. I'm looking forward to the book club, and we can talk about our own experiences with the Monarchs, and we can inspire each other. And I do presentations in front of kids, so literally I am totally used to getting the most random, crazy, weird questions. So bring it on. I'm not scared.
I love it. Well, if anyone else has a question, feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or throw it in the chat.
Yeah, could you just, what is the best way to buy the book? Was it from that website you showed earlier?
Yep, we have a Monarch, the Bicycling with Butterflies Monarch package where you can get a few other items from us, as well as a tag with a butterfly number on it that you can track later in the year when we partake in that. I'm trying to get the
Oh, that would be
link
cool.
here. But yes, or you can just get the book from us as well. But either way, Sarah signed and included her beautiful watercolor print with the book and the book package. So I'll add that again right now so you can get it from us if you'd like. And I can always do 2-day shipping on those too, so you'll get it very quickly.
Sure, thanks.
You can also order from the store this awesome shirt that says "Water is Life." Doesn't have a monarch on it, but it has all other creatures. This was a gift from. I'm so stoked to have it. Any shirt with an animal on it is my kind of shirt.
we have quite a few of those, yeah.
Yeah, there is definitely a spiritual thing with monarchs. There's no doubt. Just 1 year in my back native land. It's small, but planted for the first time in my life milkweed, and as I mentioned in the email, a couple monarchs showed up and they just hung in my backyard, and it was very spiritual, similar to what you were talking about earlier. Almost angelic, and it was strange. I felt it, you could feel it, and then you can see them back and forth for 2 weeks, just going back and forth. And then they blessed me with it was amazing, like a parade. I actually marked the date down. I think it was early September, where all day long, every 10 minutes, there was a monarch flying over my house, and I tracked the angle at which it was flying to, and I couldn't believe it. It was directly almost to that spot where they're going to in Mexico. I just couldn't believe it.
Isn't that
And
amazing?
all day long, every 10 minutes, I stayed in my bedroom and looked out the back window, and I could see, and I would wait, okay, another 10 minutes, another one's coming. And sure enough, another one came. And my one son turned me on to it. He said, Daddy, there's monarchs flying over our house. And it was just amazing. But I'm sorry, I had to share that.
No, that is.
Yeah.
I think humans are craving that connection. We are so connected to the land. We need the land in every way, and we've just yanked ourselves out of it. And so the monarch is just such this welcome way back in. And so I think we do see that spiritualness because it's part of our DNA, and I'm just so grateful for the monarch. And it's awesome that your son noticed the monarchs. I think that's how it is often, right? We forget to look, but the kids are looking and noticing. And then the other thing that is just remarkable too is, like, my book has science in it, and I often forget the exact specifics of everything, but I'm recalling right now a study, and they were, monarchs born in New York have to have a different trajectory than monarchs born in Minnesota because they're going to the same place, right? So their trajectory is different. And scientists are still figuring out how that's done. And there was this one preliminary study. It hasn't been published. There needs to be more research done, but they translocated monarchs, I think in Kansas, and they translocated them to Georgia. And when they were released, they went the same trajectory as the monarchs in Kansas. But if they were allowed to stay for about a day in their cage in Georgia, then when they were released, they went the same trajectory as all the other Georgian monarchs. And it's just so wild and so amazing.
Yeah, I remember reading that same story. It's amazing. Yeah.
But cool. Well,
I think we're at 2:00 here. So Sarah, thank you so much for your time and sharing your stories with us.
yes, thank you.
Yeah, you remind us all that we can all change the world in our own backyards, a little at a time. So thank you very much. Thank you all for joining, and hopefully we'll see you back in a month and we can talk some more about Sarah's book.
Yeah, I'll have to read it again.
Well, thank you, Sarah. Thank you. Appreciate it. Great.
Yes,
Great job.
Thanks for the questions, and thanks for tuning in and planting the garden and all of that. Tell your son thanks for paying attention.
He'll like to hear that.
All right. Well, have a good rest of your all's day and good weekend, and hopefully the weather clears up.
You too.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Julia.
Thank you, Sarah.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. I hope it rains for you.
I
I'll
do
do a rain
too.
dance you.
Thank you. Thank you.